What's your greatest "I'm effed" moment? Story 1. Back in 2000, I was in 5th and 6th grade. Brand new computers, stupid adult entertainment websites changed my homepage of browser and installed toolbars. I thought I removed them and changed the homepage the night before. Next day while I was in school, Dad turns on computer and homepage was changed back to that adult entertainment website automatically and toolbar was installed automatically again. I come back from school and Dad tells me, "We need to talk, but first let me go use the bathroom." While he was taking a crap, I turn on computer and open that big E Internet Explorer icon. Homepage and toolbar is back. I quickly change the homepage and remove toolbar. When he gets out of the bathroom, tells me to open that big E. I did, and homepage was yahoo.com. He is like, "Close it and open it again." And yahoo.com again. He walks away without saying anything. That whole week, I scrambled around on how to fix this issue knowing we just spent $2,000 on a computer. That whole week, I left the computer on so homepage will not change back to malware-infected adult entertainment website. That whole week, Mom and Dad tried to find a way to talk to me about it, but they couldn't, and they just let it go. I ended up reformatting the PC with the CD that it came with. Story 2. I'm pretty severely diabetic. Because of that, I have bad circulation and am very susceptible to infections, especially in my legs. I went to bed one night, we were going camping, my favorite thing in the world, the next day, so I had trouble falling asleep. Once I finally did sleep for about 2 hours before waking up freezing cold and with terrible pain in my left leg. I woke my wife up because I was shivering so hard. She drove me to the ER and they admitted me immediately. My fever was so high I was delirious and was fighting and growling at the nurses who were trying to get my vitals. My wife eventually calmed me down enough for them to do their job. I had contracted strep in my leg. If I'd waited until morning to go to the hospital, I'd probably be dead. I do remember thinking on the way to the hospital before the madness set in that this was the flare-up that was going to kill me. It was pretty scary listening to my wife tell me about my behavior with the nurses. Lunging at them when they tried to put a blood pressure cuff on, biting at them when they tried to take my temp. It was more like having rabies than a skin infection. I don't remember that night at all, only the stories. Story 3. I got pulled over on a first date when I was young. I had a suspended license and a warrant because of it. I knew it was coming as soon as I saw him behind us. Lights came on, I turned to the girl and said, "Well, I'm going to be arrested here. If you'd like to continue this date at a later time, take my wallet and come bail me out." I figured I was effed either way, but I had to trust her. So I handed her my wallet and waited for the inevitable. Sure enough, she drove my car to the station, paid the bail with my money, and then waited in the front for hours while I sat in holding being processed. Of course, she told the entire staff that this was our first date and that I was really nice and on and on. Needless to say, the guards were ribbing the hell out of me back in holding. They immediately started calling me First Date. The topper of the event was the intake guards printed her out a copy of many mugshots as a keepsake of our first date. I took it in stride. After 5 hours, I was released and we went on our date to a 24-hour diner and had a good time talking. Dated about a month or so longer, then went our separate ways. Nice girl. I still think fondly of her for being a good sport. Story 4. My first time being on a ship navigating in dense ice, Antarctic pack ice, we got stuck and couldn't budge. Nearest port was 2 weeks sailing away. Nearest ship was maybe a week away. After trying to nudge back and forth for 3 hours, I started getting nervous. I was not the navigator, but a comms officer, so only observing. I went down to my cabin, pulled the survival suit out from behind my bunk, put on a second layer of wool, laid out my head torch, seasickness meds, snacks, and spare glasses, and tucked them in the waterproof bag and went up to the bridge. Then I cycled all the batteries on the emergency radios and made sure there were plenty of fresh spares, and I set the Pelican cases out on the bridge wing. I then double-checked the chargers for the backup power bank and did a routine test on all comms gear as well as fired up the Inmarsat stations. Shortly after, during dinner, the wind had changed and the ice broke up so we could keep going. The lesson taught me that I can keep a cool head, and knowing that has helped me in a lot of other stressful situations. I now work with organizing SAR operations at sea. Story 5. My best friend and I were about 10 years old. We'd often go to the elementary school to skate on the weekend because it had lots of cement walkways. One day we noticed the teacher's lounge. I wiggled the doorknob, and it opened. This was very cool, a forbidden adult place, so naturally we walked in. We didn't take anything but had a good look around. As we exited the lounge, a cop car pulled up. We just about crapped our pants. The cop asked us what we were doing, and we blubbered out, "Just looking." He proceeded to get our names and phone numbers, then put us in the back of his cruiser. By this time, we are sobbing. He left us in there and went into the room and looked around. When he came out, he let us out of the car, but we weren't home free. He told us to go home and that he'd be calling our parents soon. We went home, and every time the phone rang, I knew my life as I knew it was over. It was awful. This went on for a few days until I realized he was never going to call. That cop was smart. His punishment was far worse than anything my parents would have done. Every once in a while, you get one of those nice folks who knows that sometimes it is best not to chance getting a kid in major trouble with a parent you know nothing about, and instead just teach them a lesson in your own, more subtle way. Story 6. Well, I used to make slightly altered driver's licenses. Everything went smoothly for months. Then 9/11, no, I did not supply them with any ID, happened, and they cracked down on Illinois and Iowa on it. Then one weekend, 2 different people in 2 different cities got caught with their real and my slightly altered ID. The cops wanted to know which was real. When they both called me, that's when I knew I was effed. Edit. I got into the business because I wanted an ID, so I made one and it was okay. Then I met a guy who made them in a slightly different way. We kinda took the best parts of both and combined them. Then our friends wanted them and $50 was $50. Then their friends wanted them, and it got out of control. I ended up making a deal that involved them being able to recover all their IDs. No one with one was charged besides the one that got caught on their own. I made a plea and did not do any jail time. I was also a criminal justice major and ruined that whole thing. Good times. Story 7. It was a cold night. I was driving down the highway on a 20-mile stretch between my origin and my destination. I had the window cracked as I was smoking and was washing out the tiny crack in the window. As I finished my cigarette, I went to flick my cigarette out the window when it bumped against it and instead fell into my door jamb, which happened to be semi-full with papers. It immediately caught fire. I rolled the window down and started throwing flaming pieces of paper out the window. Mind you, this was a completely empty highway at about 4 a.m. I was watching the road ahead of me to make sure no cars were coming as I scrambled to throw the flaming pieces of scrap out my window. As you can guess by now, the cherries came on and I was pulled over. I drank that night and just knew I was going to blow over the limit. Definitely my worst, well, I'm effed moment. But because of that moment, I am where I am today, and I stopped driving after imbibing even a little, and things are pretty good all around. 0 out of 10. Would not recommend. Story 8. I was working in an animal shelter when we got a meth-addicted Rottweiler in. She lived in a home with 2 meth addicts and makers. She was a trained attack dog, and she was also detoxing. Needless to say, she was pretty vicious. The officer that brought her in went with me to put her in isolation kennel so he could take photos for evidence or something. When I got her in the kennel and loosened the loop on the catch pole, she managed to barge her way out of the kennel, and now she's loose in the isolation room with me and the officer. I got her to stop moving, and I'm about to slip the catch pole around her neck when the officer tries to be a gentleman by grabbing the pole and trying to get her under control. She redirects her aggression and chomps down on my inner thigh and starts to shake. Thankfully, I was able to reach down and give her neck and head a big hug so she couldn't move, and she let go. The officer got her on the pole and took me to the hospital. Now the city cops won't pull me over as a sort of apology. At least not for speeding within a reasonable amount over anyways. Folks, if you are in a situation with a somewhat unpredictable animal and you are with someone whose job involves dealing with potentially difficult animals, don't do crap without asking them or getting orders from them, please. Story 9. This was when I was in 7th grade. I went to a really small Catholic school, and my parents a lot of times helped out around the school on weekends. So I was often there in an almost empty school with nothing to do really. I, for some reason, had a very different locker than most of the other kids in the school. Mine was a really short locker, but very wide. I'd always wondered if I could fit inside of it. I figured this was a good time to do it with nobody around to see me finally solve this stupid mystery. So I get inside and I'm kind of scrunched in there. Well, the goddamn door shuts on me. I'm trying to use my fingers to open the latch from the inside, but I can't do it. So I've locked myself inside my own damn locker until probably 20 minutes later my dad and another adult family friend comes along and I start pounding on the door. They laugh and laugh and laugh and laugh. You know what? I'll just let you guys know when they're done laughing. It's been 14 years, so I'm not sure that's gonna be anytime soon. Story 10. My parents were really strict growing up, and at 16, I not only wasn't allowed to get my license, but I also couldn't ride with teen drivers, aka any of my friends. So my bestie and I are at her house, and we decide to go for a drive 2 minutes down the road to Brooks for some candies and crap. No biggie, it'll take 5 minutes, no one will know. We're literally about to walk up to check out, and my stepmother walks in. Cue I'm effed moment. So, I freak out and duck down between aisles as my stepmother spots my friend and starts to talk to her, who is noticeably scared, and lies, saying I was still at her house. I go to the car, she checks out, and my suspicious stepmom follows and gets in her car. At this point, I'm literally on the floor of the passenger seat as my friend pulls away and up the road at night with no lights on as my stepmom follows. Clearly, knowing something was up, we didn't even make it home before stepmom is calling her parents. Story 11. After skipping lunch during a business trip, I was starving when the dinner appetizers were being passed around at a formal function after work hours. So I grabbed a shrimp on a toothpick and it managed to slide down my throat after one bite almost whole. I can't get any air out or in. After 20 seconds or so, I make eye contact with an executive from my company and I make the universal sign for choking. He gets it and asks me if I was choking and I nod yes. He asks me if I want the Heimlich, and I vigorously nod, yes! He does it quickly and effectively, and the offending shrimp was dislodged into a handy napkin, not shot across the room like in the movies. The whole process took less than 30 seconds, and people standing 5 feet from us didn't even know it happened. Choking is a very silent way to go. I actually choked on a slice of bratwurst when I was like 5 or 6 years old, and holy crap, the panic I felt was wild. Thank heavens my uncle, the only adult around, knew the Heimlich maneuver and saved my life. I did not enjoy the taste of bratwurst for literally like a decade after that. Story 12. I have 2. The first was when I got shot by the cops, the time between knowing I was hit and the pain setting in. Luckily, it was a beanbag round. The second was when I had to stand up to a guy who was as tall as me. I'm 6'9", but was heavier because of all his packed muscles. He fried his brain on steroids and was wanting to beat the woman standing behind me to death. Mental facilities in the US suck. He was fuming, had already knocked one other guy out, and could have easily torn me to pieces, but he didn't. He stood there, staring into my eyes, fuming. I forgot what I said to him. I think I went into shock. I was so scared, but managed to not freak out until the orderlies arrived minutes later, tackled and coat-tailed him. As soon as I knew I was safe, I broke down and started bawling like a child. Story 13. So I went in a roller coaster and this guy comes to shove air out of my lungs as he attempts to make sure the mechanism has me secured, the usual. Then as the ride starts and I'm about out of hearing distance, I test the brace again out of boredom more than anything else. It wasn't locked. I could lift it to above my shoulders. My first thought was, okay, this is how I die. Kind of expected it, really. And then we pass that slow part where you are just climbing a slope. Not wanting to fall, I grip the brace as close to the hinge as possible so the centrifugal force doesn't accidentally open it. I guess the really lucky part was that this ride didn't make any looping or sharp turns, just steep drops. After it all ended, I made sure I was still alive and went up to the controller to tell him about it. His face lost color and the ride shut down. Still didn't even scream. Story 14. About 8 years ago, my friend Drew flicked off this truck full of bros that was tailgating us. They followed us to a grocery store parking lot and got out to confront us. I peeled out, started speeding down the road, and next thing I know, I'm in a full-on car chase. My dumb butt turns off the main road because I was hoping I could lose them. Nope. They cornered us in a cul-de-sac. All the bros got out of the truck, and 2 of them had bats. I was pretty sure I was about to die. Dude came to the window and started screaming at me about how much of a pea I was and how easily he could kill me. He made me tell him I was his bee. And I assured him that I was his bee. He made me say it about 8 times. Then he bucked at me, turned around, got in his truck, and left. Scariest experience I've had in my life. To this day, I won't even honk at someone no matter what they do on the road. Yeah, I tend to be a bit of an angry driver if someone cuts me off or is driving dangerously, and I am often tempted to flick people off or do something to get their attention. Then I remember that I know nothing about that person, what weapons they might have, and just how much angrier they might be than me, and I just go on my way. Story 15. As a child about 11 years old, climbing a big old tree at the Secret Lake. Must have been 20 to 30 feet up when the branch I was standing on just went like dust away from me. Falling head first was one of those life-flashing past moments, and being only 11, it didn't take long. Was saved by ending upside down tangled in barbed wire fence. Never did tell my mom the truth about how my jeans and legs got ripped to pieces. Climbed a tree when I was 10, had binoculars, just surveying the hamlet where I lived, honest, and I fell. It wasn't too far a distance, I wouldn't even have broken anything, but the rope on my binoculars got caught on the branch, and if I hadn't immediately broken, it would have undoubtedly snapped my neck. Had a scar right around my neck for the next few months. Please like and subscribe if you've made it this far. I hope you'll enjoy the rest of the video and have a wonderful day. Story 16. Went on a double date when I was 20. Took the girls to a lookout cabin in the Gatineau Hills. No imminent action, so me and the dude got bored. We decided to climb down a steep hill to find a waterfall we could hear. It was 2 foot tall. Not worth it, considering. Other dude has bright idea to climb up directly under the girls and scare them. This section is a sheer cliff, but F it, we're 20 and invincible. Right near the top, my friend points to a rock and says, "Careful, this one's loose." He then proceeds to step on said rock and push himself up and over the edge. I get to the same spot and that particular rock is looking pretty handy. I assumed if it could hold my buddy's weight, I could grab it for a quick second. I assumed wrong. The rock came straight out, super slow-mo in my head. I'm effed. 60 foot straight down. I should be dead. Instead, it's 20 years later and I'm tapping away my story on a handheld supercomputer while pooping. Life is grand, kids. Story 17. The moment I almost rear-ended a parking car going 50 kilometers per hour, 31 miles per hour, on my bicycle. I was going downhill without a helmet on, smart, I know, when I suddenly noticed the parking car. I tried to brake but just ended up sliding my way towards it. Entering the road to go past it was not an option as cars were driving by, so of course, I did it anyway. I somehow managed to squeeze between the car and the traffic, slid my way along the parked car's side, tore off the mirror, and flew across the bonnet, my bike going the other direction. Miraculously, I wasn't even bruised slightly. My bike was barely bent at all, so I just sat there and tried to process what just happened. I could have died easily that day. As someone who used to do a lot, and I mean a lot, of cycling, folks, wear a helmet. I've known people who are very much alive solely because of wearing a helmet. It isn't worth taking a risk when you can be going at car speeds without the body of a car to protect you. Story 18. When I hit a patch of black ice and lost complete control of my car. Everything I learned in driver's ed and everything my dad ever taught me just blanked out of my mind like a blue screen of death. I just kind of sat back and went, well, crap, before hitting the side of the road and flying through the air for 15 feet before rolling my car 3 times. It rolled from front to back at one point and busted out the windows and packed me in with snow, so I was basically protected with packing peanuts. When I came to, I got out of the car without any harm done to me. The lady who stopped to help yelled out to me, "Ma'am, are you okay?" And I just shouted back, "My dad is going to kill me. My insurance will go up." Story 19. Went on a bender while on a business trip to Japan. Managed to pass out in someone's front yard and was woken by the police at 5 a.m. Taken to police station, and during the process they found a small amount of C on me. I knew I was effed and looked at a long stint in a Japanese jail. Life flashed before my eyes, the whole bit. The lower-level cops called down a more senior detective and showed him what they found. He gave an almost imperceptible shake of his head. They made me throw it in the bin, then just sent me on my way. To this day, it shocks me. What a close call that was. Story 20. As a little kid, I was traveling with my family on a plane to Dubai. Once it landed, I went down one aisle, family went down the other. I didn't know and thought my family were behind me, kept walking forward, and eventually when I looked back, they weren't there. Well, crap. Walked back and forth for what felt like an eternity in the airport trying to find them since I was lost in a foreign airport without my passport or identification, was with my parents. freaking out because there was a police person there and kept looking at me funny since I was an unattended Asian kid freaking out. Eventually, I was reunited with my family, but man, it was terrifying as a kid. Home Alone 6, Dubai. Story 21. When I got caught shoplifting, I was a little crap from the local supermarket, and they called my school because I was moronic enough to wear my school uniform and get caught. The school dean came to the shop, noticed who I was because, and what my name was because we sorta knew each other, and they rang my parents. My parents are extremely religious and hate doing something wrong/morals, even if they are little stuff. Safe to say I got yelled at by my dad, but he didn't hit me, thank F, although I deserved it. My best friend at the time also got caught, and he said he got a massive smash by his 6'4" father. Hey parents, don't hit your kids for shoplifting or anything. Like, yeah, they did a wrong. That doesn't mean you have to do a wrong as well. There are better, less abusive ways to teach your kids a lesson if you're smart about it. Story 22. 16-year-old come home to find that my mom had rearranged the game room, which is where the adult entertainment tape I had was hidden. Look at the cabinet where it was stashed. Yep. Cleaned out. Oh crap. Looking back at it, it's not that big of a deal, but at the time, I thought it was the end. Oh god, the memories. Back when I lived with my mom, I had a H problem and a bedroom full of paraphernalia. Several times, she organized my room for me. Now that is effing scary. Still makes my knees weak to picture my mom with tears in her eyes holding a bag of insulin syringes and my spoon in front of me. Story 23. I'd started selling mass amounts of ecstasy in Phoenix. I'm talking about 8,000 pills every 2 weeks. Life was great, was making more money than my parents made in a year in a week. I used to like to go shooting and one day had brought about 4,000 rounds that were sitting in the bed of my truck while I was driving around. And all of a sudden, I'm being pulled over. I instantly think it's just a nosy cop wondering why I have giant boxes of bullets in my bed. Then I notice it's not just one car. I pulled over, and when an officer approached my window, the lanyard he had around his neck said, Drug Enforcement Agency. That's when I knew I was effed. Story 24. At a friend's summer house, our parents went out for the evening, so he convinces me that we should get drunk off this vodka bottle in the freezer. So we mix it with pineapple juice, splitting it almost 50-50 in some tall glasses. Then I go on and we end up finishing the whole bottle, a 750 milliliter bottle, and I drank a majority. Fran decides to get his dad's gin out. We drink that. A bit later, the parents come home. Then I wake up in bed, look to my side, and see the wall and floor absolutely covered in vomit. My friend turns to look at me and just laughs and says, "Oh, F." Regardless to say, my parents weren't particularly proud of me. I feel like some of these stories might have a lesson to teach about substance abuse. Now, if only I could figure out just what that lesson was. Story 25. Just a few days ago, my first time going rafting, and my group and I were about to get in the raft, and all the instructors kept saying, "Wow, this is the roughest water I've seen in 7 years. No biggie, let's go rafting, bees!" End up being caught between two currents and flipping over. I was stuck under the raft for about 2 minutes until I was finally yanked out and dragged through the river until I hit a rock and climbed on top. The entire time my only thought was, well, this is how I die. Turns out a woman in my group did die. She hit her head underwater, passed out, and drowned. Story 26. I was a soldier in Iraq in 2003, walking back to my bunk after using the internet cafe. Some a-hole insurgent decided to start firing mortars at our base. As soon as I heard the impacts, I ran to an abandoned building and got really tiny in a corner. From where I was, I could see the mortars were being walked in the general direction where I was taking cover. Dude fired probably 6 to 7 mortars, and each one got closer and closer to my position. They must have ran out of ammo or courage because the last impact hit about 100 meters from where I was. Story 27. I broke up with my abusive ex-boyfriend back in August. I started to ignore his phone calls and texts because I was trying to move on. This peed him off a lot. One day I'm at home alone and his car pulls into my driveway. He slams the door closed and starts banging on my front door. I'm about to dial 911 when it stops and I start to calm down a little bit. And then I heard the back door slam shut and him screaming my name. He jumped the fence and managed to get it unlocked. That was about the time that I figured I was effed. Jesus, I'm so sorry. At least you're here writing this, so I feel like you managed to survive, but even still, that is just awful. Story 28. I was riding my ATV down the road going 40 or 50 miles per hour. We had a snow day that day, and the roads were terrible, so no cars were out on the road. The road was mostly snow, so my ATV was going on it fine, but then I hit a patch of ice and started swerving back and forth. I lost control of it. For a split second, I thought I was going to die because there were telephone poles on the side of the road I could fly into. I ended up flipping the ATV, but I flew off and landed safely in a snowdrift. Probably the luckiest moment of my life. Story 29. Last night, my effing cat locked me out of my house. He jumps up at door handles a lot. I'd popped out for a smoke and could hear him jumping up at the handle. When I went to go back in, I couldn't open the door. He'd somehow turned the effing key. Just enough so that a spare key couldn't unlock it from the outside. I was absolutely mortified. After several failed attempts to barge through, I had to ring the police, who came and battered the door down. The neighbors must think I'm some sort of drug lord or something. Story 30. Helping my parents out in the garden, age 12-ish, I suppose, they had me breaking up these big bits of wood for some reason or another. I found a big metal pole and thought it would be a great idea to use that, but it snapped on the first hit and hit me in the face, then the shoulder. At first, I thought I was gonna go blind, so I ran to the mirror screaming to see what I'd done. Small cut on face, huge bone-deep gash on shoulder. Calmed right down, pretty much sat down and thought, at least it wasn't my eyes. It was pretty damn close to my eyes. Story 31. Got double jumped by a way bigger kid on one of the old school trampolines back when I was about 10 years old. My trajectory had me coming down on the rail right between my legs. I summoned the power of 1,000 10-year-olds and managed to stop my entire body with my hands on that rail. I now have a 3-year-old son as a reward for my burst of strength. My nads lived to spunk another day. I feel like any time I've ever been on a trampoline could be my, well, I'm effed moment, because those things are just made to hurt people. Damn it, they are so friggin' fun, I would jump on one right now if I could. Story 32. Riding in the mountains, I see a crest in the road. Thought it would be fun to have a little airtime on my bike. So instead of braking, I speed up, hit the crest and catch some air, only to see a pickup truck coming towards me. I honestly thought I would die, couldn't brake and couldn't turn anywhere, in the air. But the truck driver was a decent man and braked hard turned away from me. Thanks, man. Story 33. A friend called me saying he had been kicked out and needed help picking his stuff up. Was doing well in chemistry, the only class I had that morning, so I figured I could skip one and go help. Show 2 days later for the next class, and they began handing out graded midterms. That's why you should keep a calendar. Story 34. Buddy needs a ride at 10 p.m. Borrow Dad's car, pick him up, and get on the way. Get pulled over for speeding, and as soon as you see the red and blues, he says the one thing you don't want to hear. Don't pull over. My backpack is full of drugs you were taking me to sell. Story 35. Enlisted in the Marines because I wanted the challenge, not because I actually wanted to fight or anything. Naive, I know. While I was in dental waiting to get my wisdom teeth pulled, a handful of crapheads crashed planes into the World Trade Center. Well, consider yourself thoroughly challenged. But more seriously, I was a senior in high school when 9/11 happened, and I had been kind of considering going into the Navy because after a test, they wanted me for an advanced program, and it seemed like a good deal. Seemed like less of a good deal after that incident. Story 36. That exact millisecond when you realize you're leaning too far back in your chair and your life flashes before your eyes and you accept your fate. Story 37. Woke up at 9:15. Final exam started at 8:45. I would literally just start sobbing. Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.